right. Hello, everybody. Got situated at my desk just in time. Ovaltine Patrol already in the house. Howdy, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, sir. Welcome to our weekly look at what's going on in the OSR subreddit. I don't think I have any programming or show notes today. I thought we did really good work yesterday in creating our starting Hex Crawl. So if you like Hex Crawl stuff, you can take a look at yesterday's stream where we used the advice that I went over in the stream before that to create a starting Hex Crawl here. That was a lot of fun. And of course, soon after I posted the video on me going over some starting Hex Crawl procedures and advice from different sources, I got a couple more that were sort of brought to my attention. So maybe I'll do a part 2 looking at some other, I don't want to say newcomers, but some other alternates for creating Hex Crawls. Hey, Brian Smith. Welcome. So that's all I've got. Check that stuff out. And I think, let's see, yep, I've got the windows all set. We're ready to rock and roll. Let's give it a refresh. We are on the hot tab, as we like to do here. Got Gelatinous Cube, the Noble Faction. Let's see, this one's a good question. I like that they have mentioned that they're looking for help. It's not random tables that we don't know what they're asking for. Let's see, maybe this will spur some discussion. This is posted by Mario Man 134. I love random tables, but I'm wondering how people use them in practice. I'm relatively new to the hobby, and I've seen and saved a lot of great random tables. But when I'm actually sitting down to jam a session, I tend to forget to use them, especially the more specific ones, or forget where they are in the book I'm referencing and bog down the game. The best use I've gotten out of random tables is using them as prep tools between sessions, but I've seen some GMs say they can go into a session with nothing planned and generate all of their content through random tables. Is there a trick to using random tables, or is it just something you get better at doing through practice? Well, Mario Man 134, who will probably not see this, but in case this question actually does come up, and I've seen people actually have asked me, hey, could you go through a practical example of using hex table or random tables in a gaming situation? Maybe that will come up at some point. It's kind of hard to do without actually having a game session. I suppose I could bring somebody on, or maybe use the chat and say, chat, throw me a situation, and I'll try to do it through it, use the tables. But the key is going to be, besides, sure, practice is going to be good. The more you can kind of improv, or you're comfortable with that, and kind of throwing things out on the fly, that is going to help you. I think having the tables you want that are at your disposal, at your fingertips, easily is really probably going to be the main thing. Because, yeah, like Mario Man 134 mentions, you may have the table, but if you can't find it, there's nothing more awkward. And I know I always start to feel kind of nervous and fiddly if everyone's looking at me and I'm trying to scramble through a book. I tend to want to just give up and do something else. So if I can't find the table I want, I think this happened even yesterday on the stream. I was looking for a certain thing, I couldn't find it, and I just, after a minute or two, I'm realizing that people are looking at me, nothing's happening, it's just dead air. Then I'm like, okay, let's move on to something else, or I'll make something up else instead. I think I was looking for kind of, I wanted to generate, yesterday I wanted to generate some terrain. I don't know if that's even in the D30 book, but I had the D30 book out in PDF form. Like, I just want to generate some terrain. And then I couldn't find it. So I was like, oh, forget about it. I'll do this other thing instead. So that's definitely an issue. So you want to get the tables you want. If you have PDFs, you can bookmark the PDFs. You really can do something like take a picture of it. Use something. I've been using Ouija or Weehy, however you pronounce it, as kind of a whiteboard. You can use any kind of collection sort of tool you want. You could make almost a virtual DM's screen with a bunch of tables. Pick the tables out. Ooh, I like this table. I like that table. So grab them, take pictures of them, snapshots, copy, paste them, however you want, and get a version of that on your little screen. And that way you can just go to your reference screen, app, whatever, document in an app or on whatever, and then find and then pull it up. If you're using physical books, I like to kind of tear up Post-it notes and use them kind of sticky, or you could have other pieces of cardboard or old bookmarks if you have them, and just fill bookmarks. Probably if you think of a way to color code them, that way you can kind of, or write on them something so you can figure out, like this, there are some Post-it notes that are nice because they're multicolored and they're slender and small. So you could have like, okay, yellow is for my wandering monsters. Blue is for generating NPCs. Red is for generating environment encounters, however they're laid up, right? And you could fill them in your book so that you could pick out the book and you go, oh, boom, I need to get there, and just rifle open to that page and hopefully not tear your book apart in the process. But yes, you're going to get better at it with practice, and I really think it's the practice is going to help in and of itself, but it's more about you're going to develop your own preferred way of managing it, but you're going to want to come up with a system and then put that in place. Bob Mosdell says, actually, that statement you just made about new makes me wonder, do you think there's anything that's come out in the last 10 or so years that's new regarding hex crawling, or is it all OSR nostalgia? Hold on to that thought, Bob Mosdell. I'll get it in a second. Brian Smith says, I think Mario Man is assuming there's a right way to prep or run, mentioning that people say they can run with no prep. Sounds like they think it's a goal if they know the trick, not a style. Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot to unpack there. I think the no prep style is always, or I don't know, is it a style, type, whatever. The ideal or no prep is going to be an ideal for some people because that is a big barrier to GMing, prepping. So someone says, look, I can no prep it with this tool or this magic goblet. Ooh, only $19.95. Order now. Buy one, get one free. It's always going to be enticing. So people are going to look for ways to minimize their prep. I think it pertains, kind of getting around to what Bob Mosdell mentioned on hex crawling. I think part of the issue is it's kind of like you're putting in work. No matter what you're putting in work, where are you putting in the work? I think with a no prep kind of style, and I won't say a no prep, but I do kind of a low prep campaign. There's still work that goes on. There's a lot of mind share as I'm thinking about stuff and I'm kind of getting embedded in this world that I've created. There's the prep of setting up all these encounter tables, setting up my hex crawls, setting up my hexes, setting up all the stuff I've done in the background. That means that I'm going to do this amount of prep work out here so that during the games or individual weeks, I'm doing a little bit of prep work. Now, does it end up that I'm saving prep? I think over time it does, but it's going to depend. Some people will say, you know what, if I have this much time of prep, I'm going to do that all in front and then have no prep in between sessions, or I'm going to just do basically the same total amount of prep, only I'm going to divide it in between sessions. And yeah, like Brian Smith alluded to, there is no particular right way. He also says, it's like I could just say, I bake cookies with no prep. Who's to say they're any good or my friends enjoy them? I mean, yeah, that's the other thing with the internet, right? We're all great at sitting there and saying, here's how we should do it. Here's how you should do it. But you don't get much chance necessarily to see how they do it, to see like, oh, these things are working. Does it really work? I mean, and that's something I've liked about the lab that we did yesterday. And I want to do more of that, is putting into practical usage. Like, look, we looked at these ways of making these little things, but like a lot of stuff you see from people who've been doing things a long time or have a lot of experience, it always seems easy, right? Until you try it. So it's nice to kind of do that. And back to, I think I don't have anything else to say on this. So back to Bob Mosdell and asking about hex crawls. It's a really good point. I think a lot of I don't know that anything super new has come out. I don't think anyone has trailblazed some really, really new thing. I mean, I think there's some things we could look at and say, I don't know, 10 years. Yeah, I don't want to get into a semantic argument of, well, yeah, actually, Todd, that came out 15 years ago, so it doesn't count. Like, whatever in recent history. Because I think stuff like usage die, which it may not technically be within 10 years, but I think is certainly a newer development, has been interesting and has had people looking at different ways of handling things like supply, and instead of tracking individual things to abstracting it out using usage dice, calling it supply, which I think like Into the Weird and Wild does, and some other tools have done. I think people have chosen, okay, we abstracting different things, which makes sense because a lot of the game is abstraction. So I think the game is in a weird spot, I think, sometimes with what the game decides, like we're going to abstract this versus we're going to count every singular piece of this other thing. So I think looking at maybe, hey, what can we abstract or what shouldn't we do? What do we want to focus on? And doing it in kind of if I would say the thing of the last, say the OSR, maybe the new SR, just sort of newer OSR as opposed to retro clone OSR, is to trying to keep things simple, because you've got stuff like the Wilderness Survival Guide, which I don't have right on me. It's in the back somewhere. It's a super great book. Tons of great stuff in there, but I mean, it is crunchy. And if you want a lot of that crunch and lots of really complex tables and this table and then that subtable and this other subtable. It's got you covered. You want that crunch, you want that level of detail, you've got it. And when you look at a lot of the source books, the Dungeoneer Survival Guide's another one, and kind of that ilk of that generation, they really went deep into the crunch. And I think maybe what people are trying to do now is on that kind of, can we get the best, or how close can we get? Can we get maybe 70% or 80% of the things that we want out of that kind of crunchy system, the benefits? What are the things that this system's giving us? Weather and navigation, obstacles to travel and interesting situations and things like that, exhaustion, whatever. And can we get, maybe we can't get all the way there because having some crunch does have some benefits, but you can say, can we get 80% there, but with like 10% of the added mechanics? And I think folks have done a good job coming up with stuff. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but that figuring out of maybe making it almost an a la carte process of, hey, if you want to delve into this aspect of exploration, then here's something you can do that you can kind of easily add into your system, and it's not going to add a whole bunch of levels versus not. I might think that might be, but this is off the top of my head, so I leave myself room to completely change my mind if I so choose. Bryce Smith says, it's all about the chew, not the fluff or the crunch. That's one way of putting it. All right, so that was about random tables and also about hex crawls. But one thing I will say, Bob Mosel, that was interesting is that a lot of the tools I looked at, so those beginner hex crawl tools, when I went back and looked at those Kelleris documents, they're old, but they're still incredibly useful. And people have done things differently, maybe made things a little bit neater looking. But a lot of the stuff, it's really iterating on those ideas and coming up with just better designs, maybe a different workflow that appeals to different people. But yeah, those things are still just as useful. That 3 hex thing is, 12 whatever years old. It's still pretty much as useful now, and people still reference it now as it did back then, and have people come up with tons of better ways to do it. No, I mean, part of that's probably because it is just a very simple idea. Hey, rule of 3, that's one of the oldest rules in the history of rules, is the rule of 3. But of all that stuff, no, I don't know that we've come up with, I can't say we've moved beyond it and found a better way. There is no better way. That was random tables and some extra stuff. Mini BX we looked at a while back. I think our big takeaway was that it's not really, Mini BX is maybe a little bit misleading because it's a fair bit different than BX, but I thought it was kind of cool. Anyway, it had some interesting ideas, so I give it a thumbs up. I got an RPG review. Dumb question. Hey, look at that. There I can stare at myself and get lost in the mirrors of mirrors. But I won't. Death Space. Okay. Gloomwood player report. Okay. Name and magic items. All right. This I thought was cool. I uploaded. I didn't really look at it, but I don't think I really need to go in here, but I think it makes sense. If you got address books, you can make an index of campaign elements. And if you remember what address books, those physical ones look like, they were a little booklet, but it had tabs with the different letters. Sometimes had dates and things in there, and you would write people's names and addresses. I know, crazy old ancient technology, but I can see that totally working for things, because as long as you can remember the names of them, or you could use the names for your places. So you could put if you had a place, that was, I don't know, Apex Mountain A, then you could put all your stuff about Apex Mountain under A or something similar to that. So it seemed like a cool idea. Monsters of May, a YouTube channel about AI generated RPG content, which we kind of looked at a while ago, and I don't think I have anything more to say to that. I didn't actually read up on power armor rules, but someone just downvoted it for I couldn't see any reason. Someone was just saying, hey, I'm looking for rules about power armor, and does anyone have power armor rules to share? And then someone just came by and downvoted it. And I don't understand that, Reddit. Do better. Okay, maybe you're not interested, random downvoting Redditor, in power armor rules, but that doesn't mean it deserves your downvote. It's a perfectly fine topic of discussion. So I tried to right that little wrong. Oh, Tang Pao says Ascaleth is one of their friends. What was Ascaleth? Well, First, look at that. See, look at that. Somebody came by and downvoted it. Are you kidding me? Oh, now it's back. All right. Oh my gosh. All right. So Tang Pao, friend of the channel, is involved with Askaleth. So hey, if I can't pimp stuff for friends, then what can I do? So let's take a look. Monkey Blood design. That sounds familiar. Have I looked at Monkey Blood design stuff before? I don't know. All right, so we've got an image. Well, I'm just going to go to the thing itself. We'll see what it is. I don't know what it is. We'll see what it is. This is Askaleth, the last great city. It ends this weekend. You know, that font for their title, I really like the feeling of it, but man, it is a bit tough to read. If I didn't know that this read Askaleth because it says it in a normal font up there, I might have a slightly hard time deciphering that. But it looks cool, but readability wise, that's a tough one. All right, so they have a Kickstarter. They have reached their funding. They got 2 stretch goals, and their next stretch goal is within easy reach. Brian Smith, I think going back to the address book, says that they like those crazy old man physical artifacts, and they can't leave a dusty box of various homebrew world notes for my daughter to find in the attic. What's the point? Yeah, it's true. That's one thing with the digital age, right? I guess there'll be a digital shoebox somewhere, but yeah, it's not quite as cool. There's nothing quite like having that physical feel and being able to find stuff like that. That's I should probably do more physical writing stuff, if only for my daughter. Tank Pal says this is zine size with a lot of random tables running on a weird gonzo city. All right, well, that sounds cool. So let's read about it. System neutral zine toolkit for weird science fantasy city role-playing. All right, that right there is a good... I will say this. This is a really nice elevator pitch. Everything you need to know. It's a zine, so we get a sense of the size and probably also how... Not only the size in terms of dimensions, but the length. It's not a huge hardcover book. It's not a pamphlet. It's a zine. System neutral tells us, great, it's not tied to any particular system. And so we got the kind of its affiliation, which is none. Its size, what is it? It's a toolkit. And what is this toolkit giving us? Weird science fantasy city stuff. Bob Munsell says, just be sure you've arranged to have your browser cache cleared upon your untimely death. Yes, indeed. All right, let me read so we got that. I like that little elevator pitch. Now here we get to the kind of, I don't know, maybe that's more of a teaser. I think an elevator pitch is technically a little bit longer, but I'm not trying to bog down into details. Well, I mean, I constantly get bogged down into details, but that's besides the point. When Tobias and Felix from Rabbit Halfling Press got in touch about their zine toolkit for a weird science fantasy city adventure generator, I got excited. We created a Discord channel where we could discuss it and plan on how to bring it to life. After reading through, I started to see how it might look in InDesign. It looked terrific. This had to exist for others. We needed to set up a crowdfunder. We needed to pay for art and print costs and postage out to wonderful gamers everywhere. They all needed to experience Askaleth in whatever way the random generator tables decided. All right, so they got a Kickstarter page. We get kind of a nice image of what it's going to look like. It definitely looks more readable from further away. So when I see it on that kind of, I know it's not real, it's a mock-up, but at that distance and size, though I still think it's partly because I know exactly what it's saying. And then if I just saw that blind, if I just printed this out full screen and threw it at my wife's face saying, tell me what that says or die, I'd have to find a new wife. But it could just be me. Let's see. Yep. Wow, I don't usually see that much kind of detail about the physical. The art, actually, I like Tang Pao. It's just that the font. Like, it's cool, but I almost think it should be one of those things where you have that and then have it written underneath it or somewhere else. It's just tough. But the actual artwork I like. So what is it? All right, so this is a low prep kit that a GM can use to pull ideas from during a game session. So see, look at that. So that Mario Man, one whatever, here's something for you. Short, punchy tables, improvisational prompts, fully playable setting. And it is intentionally incomplete. I'm glad they put this up front because people will get all kind of, there's seems to be a fair amount of split on the stuff that is it intentionally incomplete as a tool for you to complete it, or is it laziness on the part of the designers? But at least they're telling you up front, hey, look, we're leaving gaps for you, so don't add us with your hatred if you buy this and find out there are gaps involved. We have all the contributors, and then we got Kickstarter link. Seems cool if you're into wanting to create a science fantasy city role-playing scenario, maybe check it out. Tank Pal, if you want to reach out to them, I'm happy to review it because it seems kind of cool. If they've got, if they're, I don't know if it's what kind of state it's in, if there's some kind of review version, digitally, physically, or both, that they can shoot over to me. I'm happy to take a look at it in more depth. That was Ascoleth. All right, let's go to the next page. Tank Pal likes the art. Oh, they're Swedish. Cool. Yeah, a lot. It seems like that's a big thing in Sweden. Certainly the Morkborg guys and that also very much into art punk. It's all up in those Scandinavian places there. And this is yet another Spindrift Blood Orange Tangerine for the working man. All right, so you'll notice I upvoted this one here. Manual of Hexterity. This is one of the ones I will cover. I thought about, well, I could cover it today, but I won't because someone then also commented to me another piece. So I will probably do a more starting hex crawl advice scene. So I did give it an upvote because I did see this the other day. Not going to cover it today. We'll cover it when I do another, probably next week. I've now got 2 other pieces. So if you have it'd be nice to have a third one. If you got another piece that I didn't cover of sort of starting hex crawl, procedure, mechanics, advice kinds of things, happy to take it. And that will fill out the episode. Though I could probably just do it with 2, but 3 is kind of nice. Creating classes in basic Dungeons and Dragons or looking for help. I don't know if I have any super help. There's kind of a lot of... I like to lean on the cleric, which I've mentioned multiple times before because it kind of has a mix of spellcasting and martial power and sort of a special skill. I think you kind of just pick the template and tweak it, and then you kind of hope for the best, and then just make sure you tell your players you may need to tweak it more as you're playing. I mentioned the other one. It was something that Goblin Punch commented on my post, which was they have a little product on hex crawling. I don't recall exactly the name, but it's a Goblin Punch, one of their hex flower based systems or mechanical documents. So Goblin Punch hex flower thing. We got some Vaults of Varn play reports, interview. I'll just give some of these a thumbs up. Do people actually get into high level play in OSR? I think they do, though I think people gravitate towards the lower levels, but I think people do get involved. Any tips for running OSR games for strangers? I mean, I don't think it's any different than running any other game for strangers. Just set up your expectations and go. I mean, what would be different from running a different kind of game for strangers? You just need to let them know what the game is about. And if they're not familiar with OSR or whatever, I mean, you don't have to be familiar with OSR. You just lay them out what the game is. This game is about a player skill, high lethality. It's going to be a very open environment, though. I suppose if it's a one shot for strangers, then maybe it's not so open, but whatever. I mean, just lay it out to them like you would with any game you're running. Session 0 stuff. Clerical domain, flavors and fluff. I already looked at that, made a thing. I just kind of upvoted it. It's just art. Boy, there's not a ton. I shared this before on the forums. A cool kind of lo-fi Silver Axe Wilderness. All right, let's look at this one. Keep on the Borderlands. They're prepping to run B2 for some friends. Wondering if anyone out there has expanded this module, like the premise, but they always thought it was kind of odd how on top of each other the monsters' factions were. Do they build out the Caves of Chaos, slim down a number of factions by reskinning some monsters? Any advice would be helpful. I don't think you need to do any of that. I guess they don't say it implicitly, but explicitly, I should say. But it was I feel like it was always implied that the kind of the chaos temple, whatever's going back there, has sort of been gathering these monsters together, and that they kind of get along in an uneasy piece. In my own game, or I'm using adapting B2, keep on the borderlands. I kind of make that explicit where they literally have physical traces, I think, in their eyes. Their eyes glow, I think, green, and they talk about like what I forget what it's called, like the process. Forget the name of that, the process or whatever it is. And they mention kind of things like we're all being kind of gathered together, and we don't know the purpose yet, but it's sort of like only the strongest kind of survive. We got to hold our spot and try to make our way up the hierarchy of the caves and be kind of ready for when something happens, and we'll kind of know when it happens, kind of thing. So I made it pretty explicit. But I felt like it was implied that the sort of forces of chaos there have sort of bound the monsters into at least an uneasy peace. I think you can still, and this I think is key for the players. And I tried to, the way that I tried to adapt it, I tried to leave open the fact that give the players, or leave open the landscape for the players to maneuver so that they can still convince the goblins to attack the orcs or make some kind of alliance with the orcs against these other people or do things like that, because the goal of all these different factions is to be kind of at the top of the heap when the time is right, whenever that time is. So they're all looking to kind of politic and move up. And if you can kind of convince them that you're also part of the scheme, or you can at least be useful to them, then they will use you, and then potentially you can use them in return to get stuff done. Brian Smith with the bad joke about creating a table, which I shall not utter here, but you can see it in the chat. Let's see. Mega Tapira says the chaotic temple always seemed like a solid rallying point to me. All these evil creatures are perhaps drawn to the area due to its influence and perhaps nominally united under the banner of its priesthood. Not that this would completely prevent infighting, mind you. Yeah, that's pretty much my idea. Inspector Spacetime says, I have the clerics as followers of Orcus and are gathering humanoids to attack a nearby town. Any fallen are turned into skeletons or zombies through dark rituals in the cave temple. The clerics rule through fear with their spells and undead forces. Also cool. The Oldest Noob says, it's not exactly what you're asking about, but Jeffrey McKinney has greatly expanded the wilderness in Mike's World of Forsaken Wilderness Beyond. Yep, you can definitely add to it, though it doesn't really add to the story of the keep. It gives you more real estate. We checked it out on a couple of streams. It's really cool, but it has its kind of its own story. It doesn't, I don't think it really relates back to anything happening at the keep. It's kind of like you've beaten the keep and now you're looking out in the wilderness for other places to go. Here's some more stuff to go. It would be interesting if there was more explicit tie-ins to the keep, but I think the elements that are working in Mike's Mike's world are kind of completely separate from the caves, though of course you could change it yourself. Just pausing for a little more of this delicious Spindrift. Okay. I think that's all I've got for that one. Kind of seems to be running a little low on interesting stuff right now. Oh, look at that. There's another one of mine. BX versus BE. Not really. Not really. Don't really care about that. I mean, there are differences and whatever, blah, 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 but I don't know if there's anything interesting to be had there. All right, white box. Hold on a minute. Fantasy medieval adventure game. Did I get that right? Because I've mentioned on other streams how I stumble over FMAG every time I see it. It just doesn't. It doesn't translate for me. But I think maybe that's it. Fantasy medieval adventure game. Somebody applaud me or give me a thumbs up if I got that correctly. Oh, let's see. What else have we got? Dyson's Delve mini mega dungeon. Well, that's interesting. Writing a setting guide, character sheet. Man, I feel like it's kind of slim pickings in a sense. If you guys are in there, tell me, spot something for me, because this stuff seems. All right, here's one. I added weapon stances to my combat system. It is a picture. Well, that doesn't. Hopefully, let me see if there's a text involved. Because, great. So I guess we can see from the image that for a long sword, you've got a normal stance, a power stance, a height mode, or a height, which would be high, mid, or low. Maybe that's positioning. Position the sword high, mid, or low. And then you can either be swinging, thrusting, or parrying. And then your shield can be high, mid, or low, and then you submit. All right, I don't know what that's going. Let's go to the comments because that not. Oh, he's got another image. Oh, I didn't want to set the meet. Okay, yeah, that okay. So that one's an example, but I don't know. Don't know. It seems kind of complicated. Brian Smith says, "Is this the day people finally ran out of stuff to talk about for OSRDD? Mark it down." I doubt it. I'm going by the hot tab. There might be stuff just not surfacing on the hot tab. Okay, so this stuff's in Foundry, which I don't use, so I would have not recognized it if somebody didn't ask. Is there some of these where they actually say what the heck this stuff means? Why Manderley says, too crunchy for me, but glad you enjoyed it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I think in something where you have things automated, when you can sit there and go tick, 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 and maybe set a default and hit submit, it's cool. I've often mentioned, I think, if you could take Foundry and add a bunch of crunch in there to kind of keep it almost, for the most part, invisible to players, but it just runs through all the crunch in the background, that's great. I think if you find this stuff useful, awesome. But it turns a lot of stuff into kind of, maybe makes it a little bit more rock, scissors, papery than I would like. I mean, I like some of it, but it can get kind of too deep. So now it's like, so if I picked normal and someone else picked, like, what does it mean? Like, if I pick power and you pick parry the term before, like, how do those relate? There just ends up being a ton of variables, and you get in that kind of analysis paralysis sort of mode that I don't know that I'm into. But I appreciate they've done it, and it's cool that it seems to be fairly automated. Just think I'm like that other guy. Like, I'm not sure it's for me. I mean, I do like some of it a little bit, like picking a stance maybe for a fighter, but I don't think I need the specificity of high, mid, low, just power defensively, whatever, normal. I think something like that would be cool. Says, dodge, parry, thrust, spin. Yeah, that was Daffy Duck as, I forget who Daffy Duck was trying to be in that one, but some kind of swordsman. Yeah, I love Looney Tunes, and they don't come on TV anymore. I don't know where to find Looney Tunes. And they're on HBO Max, but that doesn't really help. Okay, boy, oh boy, I don't think I've ever had to scroll through so many pages to find stuff. GM screen, somebody published something. Congrats, made a GM screen. Congrats. All right, here we go. Procedure for lock picking. Oh, is Robin Hood with Porky Pig as fire talking? Porky Pig, those is great. They had a couple of Robin Hood ones. I like the one with Bugs Bunny where he's constantly waiting for Robin Hood to show up, and then I think finally Errol Flynn shows up at the end, or they picked it out of, they pulled it out of the Robin Hood movie. Or is that the one with Daffy Duck? I don't remember, but there's that one where like it's I think it's Bugs Bunny who's in the royal garden, and that kind of the guy who's always sort of a big oafy guy who's the royal guardsman who's supposed to be guarding, the royal turnips. And he's like, Darr, oh, what are you doing? And the Lord's turnips, Darr. And then, Bugs is leading him through the ringer over and over again, pretending to be the king at some point. I always love that where he just runs off screen and comes back as some character, and all of a sudden everyone just takes it forever to see through the fact that it's a bunny and not, the queen or whatever. Okay, Elva says it's Bugs, and at one point he's beating the sheriff with a royal scepter, giving a bunch of silly titles, right? Like cirrhosis of liver and all those, which can't get enough of cirrhosis of liver. Not the actual thing, but the joke title. This is submitted by, okay, so let me reset. Procedure for lockpicking, submitted by Roran Leon 22. Hey, y'all. I recently wrote up the rules I've been using for lockpicking in my ongoing Knave hack in Mosaic loose format. I don't think it's particularly revolutionary, so of course it's free, but I personally found it works well for me. Let me know what you think. So I know about Mosaic strict. I guess there's a Mosaic loose, which I'm not sure what that is, but let's take a look at this. This is posted to substituteadventure.itch.io, called simply, well, the URL is just lock. Pick lock for Mosaic strict. That'll be in the chat in a moment. Bob Montel circumference. Nice. All right, we're going to download it. I didn't already pay for this. No thanks. Just take me to the downloads. Sorry, I'm doing this for review purposes only. Hopefully, people will like it. Some folks will pay for it. Not trying to get something for nothing. Okay. Brian Smith prefers diet mosaic to watch their waistline. Brian Smith, you are picking up for Terrence's absence with the bad jokes. You're picking up his slack. Pick lock for Mosaic Strict. All right, it's a single pager with a cover. On average, a lock has between 1 to 4 mechanisms, although an especially difficult lock may have more. These are represented in-game by a series of boxes. Each box or mechanism takes 5 ticks of progress before they're considered picked. Once all mechanisms are picked, the lock is unlocked. For example, the lock below has 4 mechanisms and would take 20 ticks of progress to unlock. For most adventurers, picking a lock is a slow process. In order to pick a lock, you must have lock picks. Each attempt takes 10 minutes. Roll a d20. Mark ticks of progress equal to the result of your roll. You might allow an experienced thief to roll 2d20, or they might automatically succeed. On a roll of 1, pick one. Your pick breaks. The lock is jammed and can no longer be picked. Once each mechanism box is fully ticked, the lock is open. An experienced thief can work fast and under pressure. In order to pick a lock, you must have lock picks. Each attempt takes only moments. Let's see. Roll a d20. On a roll of 15 plus, mark d6 ticks of progress. On a roll of 1 on your d20 roll, pick 1. Your pick breaks. The lock is jammed. Can only be picked. Once each mechanism box is fully ticked, the lock is open. So I think could be. Brian Smith says they have to. Someone's got to do it, and Brian Smith has decided to be that someone. So here's what I think about this. This is one of the things where I feel like there's a great idea in here that's just made a little bit overly complicated for me. So adding multiple ticks to each box just seems to me adding steps. I would just say, okay, you got 4 things in here. That's 4 ticks. We don't need 4 times 5, just 4. Then maybe what I would say is roll a d20, have some target number, whatever that is. And I would say, since we're going to be using this for thieves and non-thieves, that we should probably, before we bring this in, think about how this works in terms of the way we're handling thief skills. So if we're going to have a d20 for this, I would say, let's just convert everything to one system. So we don't have a weird thing where we're using BX percentages in the one space and maybe a little bit of 1d6 over here, and then suddenly we're using d20 over here. Change it all if you want. But presuming that we decided we're going to do d20. And something I like to do is use the level of the dungeon. So you can use something like a target 20 or maybe target 10 plus the level of the dungeon. So you end up at 11. If you want to use a different number, you can tweak that to figure out where you want the amount, how difficult you want your average lock to be. So remember that a average roll on a d20 is going to be 10.5. So if you make it 10, then that means that people are going to succeed as much as people are going to succeed at more often, or slightly more, 51% or 55% of the time, because they're going to get 11 and the average is 10, right? So if you make it 10 plus the level, that would put it as 11, meaning that the average person would succeed. They're going to be rolling about that average. And then I would say this, for the amount you succeed, that's how many things you can check. So if you beat it by 5 and you had 5 mechanisms, you've defeated all 5 mechanisms. If you only beat it by 2, then you defeated 2 mechanisms, you need to roll again. And then I might say for thieves, just add your level as a thief. So whereas everybody's just rolling a d20 with no modifiers, no matter what, the thief is able to roll d20 plus 1 if they're level 1, d20 plus 5 if they're level 5, something like that. And so you have the mechanisms. You could use the level of the dungeon, which means that the deeper you go in the dungeon, the more likely you're going to need a thief or just be super lucky. Easy peasy, right? You can add more mechanisms to add more successes, and just it's 10 minutes per attempt. If you roll a natural 20 or something, if you want to, then that can be, it's just opens, or you could just count the part of success, and then you could even have like a failure state. Like if you fail by more than a number of mechanisms, then you've broken, jammed the lock, done something like that. I think that's just easier, and it gets you most of the way to this one without having to worry about all this kind of hashing out different things. Hey, Michael Shorten says, hey, Michael, welcome back. Chicago Wiz, aka. I might do something like this if failure was interesting, if the mechanism of solving each mechanism wasn't a roll, but something else, a riddle, an object, a spell, if there was actually something they were doing physically in real life. Yeah, I think that's the key, right? I'm always thinking when I see these mechanisms where people want you to do like, and we're going to do 5 rolls to figure this thing out. I'm like, why not just do 1 roll and then do that? I'm always about like, if we're just going to be rolling dice, let's just roll it once. And that's why I really like to use, I'm a really big fan of margins of success and failure, either having basically gradations of success, like, hey, if you succeeded by more than 5, this happens. If you succeeded by less, or if you failed by more than 5, this happens. Having a couple of those. And I also like if we have something like this where you naturally have just ticks of success or kind of these levels, to just say, hey, each number, each thing you succeed by just unlocks a bit more, and just keep it as kind of minimum rolls that you need to do, and then and then go on there. I think kind of what they want to do is they want these more complicated locks to take more time, but you could just do that by saying the amount of time is 10 minutes times the amount of mechanisms, or you can just say, look, it's the amount of rolls. So if I have to roll 3 times, it took me 30 minutes. If I did really well on my roll, it took me this long. If I can mitigate even more, and I'd probably want to have something in there also about how can we mitigate this die roll, because I want the players to figure out like how can we make 1 roll and get as many modifiers positively on there so that we don't have to spend 800 rolls doing this. But it's cool. I like where they're coming from. I like the illustrations. And there's definitely, I would say, an audience for this, because there seem to be both tables and GMs that love to just have lots of rolls. I am not one of them. Give me, if I can do 1 roll, I would rather do that than do a bunch of rolls. But it's cool. That was procedure for lock picking. This has been a tough one in terms of finding stuff. Old Kingdom, second rule. I don't need a rules. I was going to say, I'll give an upvote for creating something, but I don't know Old Kingdom rules, so seeing a clarification of that doesn't help me. Someone's world building. Oh, here's one of those enigmas. It's well upvoted, but again, Happy Rogue 121. Why not let me know? Did you do something with Against the Giants? Is this a question? Or you have something to say? I mean, it's been such slim pickings that I'm going to risk it and open it up. Ugh. Can anyone sell me on Against the Giants or not? I haven't played JN3 Saga of the Giants. In fact, I've actually only played bits of Against the Giants, just campaigns falling apart and things like that. I don't know. You're fighting against giants. It gets really tough, but you do end up getting into Lolth and the Demon Web pits. I don't know. Read through them, make of them what you will. I wish you could say a little bit more, Happy Rogue 21, or exactly what is. Have you read them? Are you hesitant for particular reasons? Give us a little bit more on what exactly you're going for than just kind of sell me on. It's a whole thing about giants and then eventually drow. That's it. You like it, you like it. You don't like it, you don't like it. Here we go. River games, somewhere between the sandbox and the railroad. That seems interesting. It's going to open me in a new tab. So finally, something to read. Let's see. Monkeywork says, going back to thieves, I only let the thief pick locks. Fighters/clerics can break them down. Magic users open spell. I generally do a roll to pick as normal, and if they fail, they can auto succeed if they spend 3 times the time. That's cool. I like that. Brian Smith says, it always feels like there's some cool lock picking minigame out there I haven't found. Like matching D6 to tumblers or something, lining them up and turning them up and down feels like a lockpick. That'll be an interesting one. I know there are board games that have you roll some dice and then manipulate them. That might be interesting, and maybe thieves get some extra manipulation. I think, again, kind of like what Chicago Michael said, was, is that enough fun, kind of, not just for you personally, but kind of for the table, if you're going to spend 10 minutes or 20 minutes real time doing this? It's one thing to say, okay, you spend 10 minutes in game time. Another thing to say, okay, here, do this Sudoku. And even though I like the idea of tumblers and, you're moving dice, which is kind of Tumbler-esque, and it's like you're making a combination, and it's cool. And if I just had one player, if I was playing kind of lone wolf with a thief, and I really wanted to get deep into kind of the thievery, that seems like a neat thing. And then maybe they'd get so many times they could flip a die, up 1, down 2, something like that, right? And then, or roll the dice, but then ones get removed. Like, I could see some really neat stuff. I feel like already I'm getting into the weeds on doing that. But in a normal game, when, that the thief, and then you got the fighter, cleric, the magic user kind of just hanging around in the background while all this little things is going on, it's kind of like the Decker problem where, the thieves in the zone doing this fun little game, but it's just all by themselves. I would skip it. So it's one of those things like I really love that idea. And if we were playing a solo or one-person thief game, I would totally be on board bringing all that kind of stuff in. But in a group game, it's tough. Rob Muscle says, here's a master lock. Go to it. Yeah, every time the thief has to pick a lock, you literally give them a lock to pick. All right, let's see what this blog has to sell us on. This is from the Improved Initiative blog. I'm going to put this between, I'm just going to call this Between Sand Boxes and Railroads. Oops, I should hide that now. Here we go. I will zoom in on this a bit. I remember to change pages first. There we go. Okay, posted on the Improved Initiative blog. This was from Monday, April 25th. River games somewhere between the sandbox and the railroad. In the eternal debate between game masters regarding the ultimate style, there are 2 major camps, sandboxes and railroads. Either you have an entire world set up and waiting for your players to explore at their own pace, or you have a tightly plotted story that will run on time to get where you want it to go. However, anyone who sat in the big chair long enough knows that it's rare for any game to be entirely one of those things, or entirely the other. Even the most unstructured sandbox is going to have some plots happening at pace, and even the most streamlined railroad is going to have layovers and stops for side quests. So what might be more useful is the term river plotting. And we have a nice picture of a river with the caption, "We'll get there when we get there." Before we get into it this week, don't forget to, sign up and blah, blah, blah. All right, he's got a Patreon, so if you love this, you can go become a patron. Oh, Michael Shorten says, let's see, for their campaign, the PCs don't roll, I roll, and I tell them the results like on checking traps. You don't think there are any traps, and they have to wonder, did they really find something, or did they fail? So what did they do then? Yep, I agree with that. I think everything's become so player-facing, but I think that's definitely things that I think work best just in terms of the tension of the game when you're keeping those roles to yourselves and things like, finding traps, or if you're using kind of persuasion, social skills, those kind of persuasion, intuition, those things all I think work best when you don't know whether you've succeeded or failed. So I agree with that. Back to the article. What is a river-style game master? The idea behind a river-style game was proposed by Marion Leal on the RPG subreddit, and they link to the original post. In short, the setup proposes thinking about games in a different way than we usually do, whether they're either all structure or all freedom. And here we have a picture of, I guess, strings stuck to a map with the caption, "There's room between these extremes, however." When thinking about a river-style game, there are certain aspects that are fixed and certain aspects that are in free flow. A river game has a fixed starting point, which is the source of the game, a beginning event, a starting conflict, or something else that operates as the wellspring of the story. It also has an ocean that it's trying to get to, which represents the eventual end of the game and what players are all trying to achieve. In between the beginning and the end, though, the river might form lakes, representing downtime arcs, branch off into tributaries, which best represent side quests and additional story hooks, and the river could even change direction dramatically before it gets where it's going. Party ends up working for the campaign's final boss for a time. This allows us to think of our games not as either a set of railroad tracks we walk straight down, or as a big, sprawling expanse where the players make their own fun. More importantly, though, this operates as a useful middle ground for GMs who find themselves on either of the extremes. If you're more of a sandbox GM, then a river setup allows you to create some fixed points while still keeping the freedom in the middle. If you're a railroad GM, this allows you to focus more on what your players are doing instead of managing the specifics of how they're going to do it. The river moves towards the ocean, and you'll get where you're going sooner or later. And then it's got some more links and stuff. I don't know. I feel like this... Okay, so I guess the first thing first, this is kind of a weird, because I'm not sure what actually. So I know they said clearly what the river means in terms of what it's doing, but it's basically saying, okay, you have a starting point, and then you have this end goal. When is the campaign over? So is the campaign over when you throw the ring into Mount Doom, or we defeat Sauron? Is the story over when you destroy the Death Star? Is the story over when something is accomplished? And that's pretty much and what separates the river from the sandbox is kind of, that's it. It's just having that end goal, because other than that, it seems like it's kind of a sandbox, because all sandboxes start with something. I mean, it's not like in a sandbox you have the freedom, because there's a time element here. You begin where things begin. It's like, yeah, but that, no matter what kind of game you're starting, you do sit down at a certain point in time in a certain place. So yeah, you always, everyone, the source of the river, or the source of the game, whatever we're calling it, that exists no matter what kind of game you're playing. I mean, you start keeping the Borderlands, you start outside the keep. There's your starting point in space and time. Even though you could play it kind of as a sandbox, you still have that starting point. And you kind of still have an endpoint if you're sort of playing through that module, even though it's kind of a sandbox. I guess it's if you taking down the elemental evil. I think the thing is with a sandbox is that you're open to the fact that there might be different oceans. You're open to the fact that your river might not flow to one particular ocean. It might turn and flow into the Pacific instead of the Atlantic, or it might turn and flow into one of the Great Lakes, or into the Gulf of Mexico, or circle around a bit. But I think often, even in sandbox campaigns, you often have some kind of overarching something, or multiple overarching something. So I'm not sure. And then if you're a type that wants the tightly plotted stuff, I don't know if this gives you anything practical, because the devil's going to be in the details. Oh, great. Start here, end here. Wonderful. But then if your thing is like, I don't know how to let go of all the twists and turns, or I don't want to, it's not convincing you that you should, and it's not giving you any practical advice on, here's what you can do if you were a railroad GM to kind of let go of some stuff, and here's the benefits of doing that, with some examples. It's not giving you that. And if you're thinking of, if you're someone on this true sandbox of, look, there's no plots, it's just guys on a map, and there's just mega dungeons abounding. I guess if you're thinking of maybe a classic like West Marches thing, where there's just mega dungeons, and players are going to have specific goals, and there is no overarching thing, you haven't detailed what's the advantage of doing it this way. It's kind of like you're relying on, but look, you're flowing towards the ocean. Okay, but what does that do for me as a GM? Because I'm not actually on a river, I'm not actually flowing anywhere. Monkeywork says, I'm not sure who the advice is actually for. It sounds nice and it's a cool analogy, but is it actually helpful or useful in any meaningful way? Yeah, Monkeywork, I agree with you. I don't really think it is. Brian Smith, it's kind of just a metaphor. What's a metaphor for? Yeah, I same thing. Like it's like someone had this nice imagery of, ooh, this is what it is, but it's sure. I mean, yeah, having an end goal for your campaign can be useful, I think. But I think I could write an article, or I could make a video on how it's useful to have an end goal, whatever regard. And I could talk about some things about why it's useful to have an end goal, and why you should maybe think about that, and have that be maybe a player-driven thing, that it's a session 0 type thing where everyone kind of agrees on the end goals. Like, I think that's a powerful thing to have, because some of the problems that I think people have when they think of sandboxes, or they get into sandboxes, is the fact that it can feel kind of nebulous, and that you have no goals, and it's a sort of, you're just sort of left to your own devices, and that can be very freeing for some people, but can also be paralyzing for both GMs and players. And I think coming out and saying you can have a sandbox and still have some kind of end goal of, this is something happening in the world or in your location or whatever, and this campaign is about doing that. It gives people some direction, and you can have your players on board. It can be something you discuss and come together and say, yeah, our goal in this campaign is to become Lords of the Realm, or our goal in this campaign is to stop the Dark One, or whatever it happens to be. But this article doesn't do any of that. It's certainly not giving you anything practical, and it's kind of just saying, like, isn't this a great metaphor? Don't you want to join the metaphor? Yeah, I don't know. Bob Mossel says, we thought it was over when the ring was destroyed, but then we had to go back and defend our base. Yeah, that's kind of that classic, the sort of classic, Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, where there's part of that where you have to not only go through and get that initiation at the end, but you have to bring that power back to demonstrate it, which is why you end up with these almost codas in the stories where it's not just about going to the ball as the, and doing that whole thing, but it's about what happens after. So you went to the ball and you wanted to go to the ball. You went to the ball, but then there's the part afterwards. So it's like, well, now you're back home. And now there's this other part where you, having done that, kind of changes yourself, changes the world. What does Jack do after he's done the beanstalk? What do the hobbits do when they come back from the wars? They now bring that power to then change their world, right? To affect a change. Bob also says, it's a straw man campaign. Yeah, it kind of is. Brian Smith says, I run more of a junk drawer campaign, bits and pieces of random stuff I forgot about until I open the drawer. That's a good way of putting it. Michael says, that's like my Alzheimer's campaign. Yeah, unless I write it down, I'm sure to forget it. Yep, pretty much. So while I appreciate coming up with the analogy, I think this is one of those a little bit half-baked. Needs more baking. Look, I love folks and their blogs, and people throw stuff out there, but I find that sometimes I wish, and maybe I just wish too much. I wish that put some more thought into it. Like, yeah, that's great, the river, but what does it actually mean? What are the practical ramifications of this river technique? What does it do for you if you were to take it from a sandbox? Otherwise, because if you think about it, like I said, it just seems like it's just like a metaphor for a metaphor's sake. Can I get one? Can I squeeze one more thing in here before we head out? Oh, we got some more stuff in here. Let's see. Monkeywork says, Sandbox doesn't mean the world can't bring drama to the players, just that the players are free to bring their own drama to the world and ignore the GMs. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing is really, right? Is the sandbox, the players always have a thing where they could just kind of walk away. Now, that might have consequences. If the world is ending and you walk away, then maybe the world ends and you have to deal with that. I mean, that could be you ending too. But yeah, that you are not the... There is no agreement that just because this thing is happening in the world that you are going to go and take care of it. You might have other things to do. Right. It says, going back to their junk drawer analogy, why are there 3 staplers with no staples? I mean, that's the question. Or I think what happens more with me is the multiple tape dispensers with no tape. Is I think would be my version of that. Null Terminator says that I made choose/roll and end goal part of they made choosing or rolling an end goal part of character design just to give them something to fall on in lieu of GM Master Story. Yep. That's a good way to do it. I usually just talk to them about it and say, hey, this is kind of what the campaign's about. Really just my current game they were all new to OSR, so I kind of gave them the spiel of, look, leveling up is getting money. And so money gives you power, and I use training, so really, literally, getting the money is going to enable you to power up. And then I also said, now think about, given that that's how the world works, what are your end goals that kind of work within that sort of framework? Because anything you want that's going to need power, you're going to need money, which means you're going to adventure, which kind of is nice because it gives you this real thing. No matter kind of what you want to do, pretty much it's going to come down to money or power. And power is going to come down to money, which is going to come down to adventuring. So it's kind of, right, it's nice. I think it gets a little bit more in the sort of modern world where it's either kind of milestones or there isn't that clear delineation. Because it doesn't work that way with killing stuff. Because killing stuff can take a lot of forms, and you're using milestones, and it's kind of like, well, then it's more story based. I don't know, but I kind of like the idea of, hey, your goals are based on your power level and or how much money you're going to have. I think almost anything's going to boil down to, I want to become the Archdruid. Well, you may not need money, but you're going to need power. Oh, I want to become a lord of a small kingdom. Well, you may not need power in terms of your own physical abilities, but you're going to need money, right? And all those kind of cycle down to, well, bottom line, how do we get any of this stuff to happen? We got to adventure. And I like that kind of neatness. Oh, R says, hey folks, thanks for all the advice for Hexed and Notion, but using both and making tons of headway. Oh, awesome. Cool, R. Glad that those are working for you. And Michael says, to help with that, I try to keep a lot of ongoing notes for the campaign. I'm restarting after 2-year hiatus. We've all forgotten, so I wrote 1-page summary. That's a great thing. Summaries are good. Things you can share are good. Fluffy the Griffin, you are late. And I think since now I'm over time, I'll probably just end it here. Monkeywork says, have you seen that the author of the really cool Neverland setting is doing an Oz one? I haven't seen it, but I will keep an eye out for it. Brian Smith says they've been keeping notes as the GM for a couple of years now, pretty much given up though since nobody else seems to have any idea or care much. They're going to murder hobo hard. So one of the nice things about using Discord for stuff is I will put stuff in the Discord chat, a name, if there's something notable, I'll put it in there. But I've told my players like they got to keep track of it, and if they get to a point where they go somewhere and they're like, oh yeah, we met the local lord a couple of weeks ago, and we want to go see him again. I'm like, okay, great. What's his name? Didn't we? It's like, oh, if you didn't write it down, then you didn't find it important enough to remember. And I don't buy those arguments of, but it was only 3 days ago in game time. It's like, I've certainly forgotten people's names in less than 3 days. And you know what? It's important that you write it down. And we have this wonderful Discord with text chat and everything. All it takes you is 2 seconds to type something out there and just log it in the chat and come back and find it. And sometimes they've forgotten stuff that I've literally put in the chat, but it's just scrolled out of view, so they've forgotten that it's there. But that's on them. So that's how I handle it. All my notes are for me. They gotta handle their own. They gotta handle their own business. All right, folks. I think we're gonna call it quits. I feel like this was like a tough stream just for content, but I always love the conversations. You guys are awesome to chat with. So I think we made the best lemonade we could out of the lemons we were dealt. And no disrespect to the authors. Maybe it's just stuff here just wasn't appealing to me, wasn't calling to me. It happens sometimes. Brian Smith says, let's be real, DMs don't have unlimited memory / brain space. Players should take some burden. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. And it just seems to be, I just feel like sometimes there's things that people used to just take for granted. Like, oh yeah, you take notes in the game. It was never an issue of like, well, I don't have time for that, or I'm not, like it was just, this is what you do. And if you didn't, then, and you lost a piece of knowledge out of it, that was your fault. We didn't get into this whole like, but my character would know, and they've got an intelligence of 18. Well, you should have had an intelligence of 10 and written down. that is a problem between the player and their character sheet, not my problem. Yeah, mapping, keeping hold of resources, and this stuff doesn't take endless amounts of time. People act like, oh, I got to add up some experience points. Oh, the horror. I mean, people used to do that when we had like crappy calculators or using our fingers or just doing the scrolling. And now you have just you do it on your phone, and it's about a 2-second job. Don't complain to me. I have no patience for that. I can tell you that much. No, I mean, and no one's complained to me about that in my game. I haven't run across it, but whoops, hit my chair thing. No one's complained about in my game. So these are hypothetical complaints, but I would not think kindly on someone who would decide to make a thing out of, but I got to add up experience, or I got to type a mark on a page to say that I shot this arrow? Yes, you do. Or you'll magically find that you ran out of arrows and didn't notice. So yes, keep track of your stuff. There you go. Maybe we should get it on a t-shirt. Have an intelligence of 10, write it down. Yeah, that's on you, not on me. Because, even in intelligence 18, people forget stuff. Nutty professors, absent-minded professors forget stuff all the time. I got no time for that. You want to remember it, write it down. Call it one of Todd's laws. I haven't had a Todd's law in a while, but have an intelligence of 10 and write it down if you want to remember it. That could be one of Todd's laws. All right, guys. I got to get back to it. Have a great rest of your day or night whenever you end up watching or listening to it. If you can give a thumbs up on your way out, that'll be awesome. If you found yourself in here and not subscribed, the subscription would be killer, and it would just let the algorithms know that you appreciate this stuff, and it would just alert you when new stuff comes along. Bye, Michael. Thanks for joining. Monkey Work, Fluffy the Griffin, Oval Team Troll, Brian Smith, everybody. Cheers. Game on. Talk to you later.